Hello and welcome to the Scuttlebutt Podcast. I'm your host, Brock Briggs, and each week I bring you a conversation with a current or former service member at the top of their craft. These conversations will make you smarter, they'll help you explore new ideas that challenge you personally and professionally, and it'll make you more money. This week I'm speaking with Nolan Gore. Nolan operates a landscaping company that's going to do over $5 million in revenue this year, which is more than 2x since he bought the company back in 2017. In this conversation, you'll learn why work-life balance doesn't exist and why, if you're an entrepreneur, striving for work-life integration is much more effective. You'll learn how to have difficult conversations with customers and why positioning really is everything. And you'll also hear about his Leadership Development Academy, where he takes D1 athletes and students with master's degree and puts them to work mowing lawns and reading all the entrepreneurship books that made us. It's really an impressive program and inspiring to hear Nolan's love to foster young people coming up in the world. You can find this episode as well as the other SMB-focused episodes, transcripts, weekly newsletter, and the YouTube channel, all on scuttlebuttpodcast.co. Please enjoy this conversation with Nolan Gore. Like I was saying, one of the best ways I think to start these would be to talk to you just about like high level, like what's going on that you're thinking about and you're working through today. Is it personal life? Like what is occupying your mind space today?
Absolutely. When you mentioned that's where we would be going at the beginning, the first thing that came to mind is my son. And so I'm gonna kind of give you an update on what's going on with my kids. I'm married to my high school sweetheart. I have 4 kids, 7, 5, 3, and a newborn. And our newborn is currently in the NICU. And so in the context of work, what I've been processing is that there are seasons that it's okay. This is hard for me to accept, but it's seasons that it's okay to not be performing as well as you want to be because of other places in your life that you have to carry a heavier load. My wife and I are just looking at each other daily right now and saying one bite at a time, we're just going to get through today. So big picture, what's going on in our lives. My son was born at 24 weeks, which is really freaking early. He was a pound and a half. He's been in the NICU for over 3 months now. He's doing really well, which is a miracle of modern medicine and God's grace upon us. And there's a really good chance that he comes out being totally fine, maybe a little bit behind from a developmental perspective, but that's extraordinary. It's meant that I've had to lean on my team in ways that I'm not necessarily comfortable in doing. It's meant that I've had to wrestle through how vulnerable to be with my team. How much weakness do I show? How do I show that? What's appropriate? How can I demonstrate what hard times look like? And how do you work through those hard times? Because we're all going to have them. And I mean, I don't know if we're 3 or 4 weeks out from him coming home, or we're 8 or 10 weeks out. It could be longer than that, depending on how things go. But that's a really big part of what's going on in our life right now, and going to be a really big part of our personal story and our community story for when I look back on this season in life.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. It is such like a vulnerable time. And when we were connecting a couple weeks ago over the phone, I went and told my wife about what was going on with you, and I was just like, this is literally crazy to me. And it's even more hitting close to home because my wife is like 26 weeks pregnant, and we're like
Yeah,
right in that window. And I think one of the things that you highlighted there is like, one, we live in a time like it's crazy for me to even think that that's possible, that we are able to the medicine and the doctors, and we have all of this tech to just like take care of babies. Like when things happen, that's why we have them there. My hat is off to you. I literally don't know how you could be focusing and like trying to manage a business. And like you just pointed out all of these big things that you're facing. That's unbelievably trying. So my hat is off to you on that.
yeah, I appreciate it. And let me dive a little bit. I think it's an interesting topic about how and when it's appropriate to be vulnerable with your team or your
Yeah.
coworkers. I I think it dramatically depends on your team and it depends on your role. But generally, the framework that I've used is I believe in sharing life. First of all, a big thing for me is I don't really believe in work-life balance. I believe in like work-life integration. One of the coolest things about working in my job in small business is that I can bring my kids to the office sometimes. I can step away if I need to accomplish something for the family. But it also means that when I'm with my family, I'm also got to think about work and working through that stuff. So I try to overlap all of it. I am the son of an entrepreneur a small business guy. And so I was the kid running around the office, and I was the kid going on trips with clients. And because they were friends and they were also clients and they were also coworkers, and all that, those interactions is a very natural part of my life. But I recently went through, there was this meeting we had the other day, and I was like, hey guys, you guys are being kind about asking about how my son's doing, and I want to update you. And I also update you on me. And then I want you to know what you can do for me, because you're always asking what you can do for me. First of all, the most important thing you can do for me is your job really well. Because when you do your job really well, it gives me the space to go and focus on my family. So that is a huge lift for my family. Secondly, I want you to know that I've been crying every day. You don't see it, but I feel it, and it hurts really bad. And that's okay. But third of all, I think you can also see that I'm still doing my job with excellence. Maybe not quite to the high standard that I would like, but I'm sharing with you guys where my timelines are slower than they would normally be, and I'm communicating that. I'm not letting it impact the way that customers see me and how I do my job in that regard. When you have a hard time, it's okay to acknowledge that to the team, but you still have to perform at a really high level and be able to communicate around that. And we're all going to have these moments. We've all got to have the moment to understand what it feels like when someone else is in that. And we have to understand how to react and empathy to that. But it's still not, it is an excuse, but I'm still going to hold you to a high standard, like I'm holding myself to a high standard. And I got a ton of really positive feedback in those conversations. And my team do care about my kids. I'm excited about bringing this boy, his name's Roy, to work and for them to see him. I'm excited about him running around and then being like, yeah, man, I prayed for you when you were born. And he's like, cool, whatever, old person. That's going to happen for his whole life, right? I think as far as my personal understanding of vulnerability and learning how to lead in vulnerability and also have expectations for people when they're in their own shitty time. I've grown a lot in that recently.
Everything that you're saying, really, the fact that you're able to do that in your workplace really speaks to the culture that you've already built in your business. The fact that you can come to them and say, hey, look, this is what's going on, but it's not this thing like the show still needs to go on. You're like, hey, this is how, like, you're using it as a rallying cry to say, we need to perform better because I'm not doing good. And that's hard for a lot of reasons. I'm sure as like an operator, like you're kind of used to the one being the one driving results. And so I think that is a really cool like outlook and that you're able to do that. Being former service, I was having this conversation with somebody the other day. The military does a really good job of like getting us to kind of like stuff those feelings on stuff. And when things are really hard, it becomes easy to just like I'm putting that away. I'm just gonna like because you still need to show up exactly like you're doing now. A little bit more of an adverse environment though, and you may not get the same type of positive support and lifting up as you maybe are here.
Yeah. So actually, let me reference that a little bit. I think that the really good leaders know how to walk that line. And again, it's hard. But I remember very specifically being deployed. I was in Kuwait and Iraq on that deployment, and our um, opso had a kid while we were on deployment. And now I, I didn't have a great relationship with this guy, but he was who I directly reported to. We had a respectful relationship, but his inability to articulate how hard it was to be away from his wife and son when his son was born actually, frankly, decreased our level of respect for the guy, because we wanted to see, like, clearly this is a hard thing. Like, it doesn't make any sense for us for you to pretend like it's not a hard thing. And if it isn't a hard thing for you, I don't know if you're the kind of person I want to lead or I want to be led by. And so I almost wish that he had been a little bit more vulnerable through that season, because it would have and even shown a little bit more weakness, because it would have shown we would have done more better work for him. And so I think counter to what we read about and see, and a little bit of what we're taught by example in the military, the really effective guys and gals that can lead in their full human self, it makes their team even more effective in the long run. And when I did have leaders that showed that stuff, and when I had the gumption to show it myself, I saw better results. And so that's if you're still in, that's something I recommend, and then take it on beyond the time in the service.
I think that there's an element of that too, that when you can, as the leader, be the one to break the ice on doing something like that and kind of expressing some vulnerability, it sends these messages without saying anything directly. It's like, hey, this is something that is okay to do. And it also sets the tone for this is how we're going to operate, even when something is really bad. It's not like we're going into full breakdown mode and things are just going to shit. And then you ask why, and it's like, oh, well, I've got this going on at home. It's like, no, we got to address this up front, set the kind of the tone for how we're gonna to maneuver around this. And like you said, it's kind of a can be a rallying cry for the people below you to kind of come together and operate at a higher level.
Yeah, and I think that a big part of it too is that uh, if you ask any of those people in those other rooms, they would still say I'm doing pretty damn good jobs, right? Like I'm still performing really well. It's just
Mhm.
not as well as I know I should be performing, and I know I could have performed had this not been the circumstance I'm in right now.
How do you manage the feeling you were referencing this a few minutes ago, but manage the feeling of it's okay to not be operating at 100% all the time? What can you kind of like unpack that a little bit?
I'll go where my brain went first. So my whole life, I'm one of those annoying people that my whole life just always expected great results and always expected to win, even if it wasn't rational. I don't struggle with a lack of confidence is maybe a better way of saying it. But this has been tempered with a faith that teaches me that I believe genuinely, when my head is in the right place, my heart's in the right place, that I'm no matter what I do, I'm not going to be good enough, right? And that's okay, and that's actually encouraging to acknowledge because we have a God that loves us no matter what. And so, a big part of my story, this might be an appropriate time for me to kind of back up and talk about why I got here, and then address this question or how I got here from a story perspective. But like I mentioned, my dad was a business guy, is a business guy, very, very successful business guy, very esteemed in our community, and has built some very large businesses. And it was a really hard thing for me to come back to business and realize, frankly, I'm probably not going to top the guy. Now, let me be clear. I still believe I will. And there's a pretty good chance, and check in with me in 50 years. But it's going to be, the chances are not good if we're just looking statistically. And that's okay, you know? So all I could real, and this is also the guy that's coming from a, f- a farm in the middle of Kansas who really did pull his own weight the entire way. And so I started higher, and I'm still going to probably end lower. And I had to come to grips with the idea that that's okay. Like that's not the hand I've been dealt. All I can do is act honorably within the hand I've been dealt, and bring a lot of other people up with me. And that's the goal now, right? And I get to still work around my dad. I still love him tremendously. I respect what he's done tremendously. And again, the only way I can get around that feeling is just the belief that all I've been given is by God's grace anyway. And so I'm going to be grateful for what I have and do my best.
There is kind of like a weird sense of understanding where you're born and also like acknowledging the things that your parents had. And I think there's kind of this natural belief that we're like, oh, we're obviously going to achieve more. I mean, like, look, they busted their butts, and it sounds like in your case, busted their butts to give you put you in as good a position as possible. Not everybody has that the fortune to do that, but it sounds like that was the case here. And I think that it's like kind of a default thought to imagine yourself like expanding and improving on that. But yeah, tough situation. What maybe we should take some time and talk a little bit about maybe what his background and then maybe what he has taught you about business and kind of get into that a little bit.
So my dad was born and raised on a farm in Kansas. His dad was pretty ill. And so because of that, he was kind of the man of the house by 11. It's not something you envy. It's not something I want for my kids. It's something that was really hard for him and his family. So he was doing school and running the tractor in the evenings, right, or in the mornings, and all the other things that had happened on a dinky farm in South. West Kansas, which is right in the heart of the Dust Bowl. Is a pretty terrible place to farm, frankly. And because of that, there's like always been this sense of like there's no excuses that are good enough. He's never articulated that explicitly, but like knowing his story, just like, well, and it's so good. There's no way I can talk back on anything. He went to Kansas State and I mean, he's a genius. We don't need to get too hard into that, but he likes to leave doors open. So he went and took the MCAT, the LSAT, the GRE, and the GMAT, and scored the top 5% on all of them. And because he didn't know what he wanted to do, and
What a situation to be in.
ended up doing none of those things because he wanted to marry my mom, and then they moved to Texas because she wanted to go to UT Law, which he never ended up doing. And he was like, joined a landscaping company with my uncle, just as like a interim. And that thing turned into a big company that they sold. And then he started other companies after that and all that stuff. But that led to me being a kid running around businesses, going to the same school. I went to Texas A&M, went to the Marine Corps. And a big part of the went to the Marine Corps was, in retrospect, I don't think I realized this at the time, but in retrospect, it was because I needed to leave that shadow. And then I already worked through the bit on me having to process that coming out of the Marine Corps. When I came out of the Marine Corps, I was going to go get my MBA. This business, someone just called my dad on it, the one I'm in now, and said, "Hey, you want to buy this thing?" My dad called me and said, "Hey, you want to put your life savings into a business that's losing money?" And I said, "That sounds like a great idea. Let's do it." And I think an interesting topic would be like there's this constant refrain in the ETA community, the entrepreneurship through acquisition community about whether or not what size business you should buy from a risk tolerance perspective and everything. I bought a really small business, right? 1.5 million at the time of buying into it. I still have a business partner who was here before. And I think it was fantastic for me to buy that small. Again, we can get into that, but when you answer your question, really, when it comes to like what my dad has taught me about business and how that applies to what I do now, first of all, I spent hundreds of hours listening to my dad on speakerphone working through stuff, right? Just driving around in the car. He had like the speakerphone in the car when it was still really shitty and you had to kind of yell at it and stuff. I mean, it's still kind of that way, but it was really bad back then. You had to like get it special installed. Well, I didn't realize until maybe 3 years ago how valuable it was for me to have those hundreds of hours of working through how to choose someone out, how to give someone your confidence, how to talk to a client, how to work through an issue with a client by telling them that it's not really your fault without telling them it's really your fault and getting them to believe that. All that stuff, super valuable. I do that stuff all day, every day now. Secondly, I got to live the world of like the small business owner. He was constant, everything, again, the integration, everything was integrated, right? Like we went on vacations because to specific places if we get to go on vacations because that's where clients told him to go because he wanted to go back and talk to the client about it because it would help build that relationship. Um, his best friends that are still his close friends and now are like uncle figures to me in many regards were clients. And there still are, which is a crazy thing. Which brings me to another thing he built or that I learned from him is he just is an extraordinary representation of what long term looks like. He's had these relationships in Austin, Texas for 35 plus years that have been built on integrity, quality of service over the long term, not the short term. And he can just make moves that look impractical in the time because he believes in what 10 or 20 years from now looks like. And they've built an extraordinary community around that. And not only have they been very successful in business, but they've really impacted a lot of lives, which counts for more, in my opinion. It's enabled by making money. You have to make money in order to have that opportunity, but he's provided a lot of opportunities for his employees and a lot of relationships with clients. So those are some big things I've taken away. I do not do the things the exact same as my dad. I don't pretend to. I am not my dad. I run things differently. I focus on different things. I'm organized in a different way than he is. I have far different leadership skills than he does. Not better or worse, just different. Um, but I saw my dad today because he wanted to chew me out about his yard, which was cool. I still learn stuff from him all the time. Still call him to ask questions.
What do you think was the final release for you of that getting out of the shadow feeling?
It was the better understanding of God's grace. I mean, that's it, right? Like I cannot. It doesn't matter how big or small I build something. I think there's a pretty damn good chance I'm going to build something big that I can be really proud of. But And it really doesn't matter. I'm gonna
Yeah.
die and people aren't gonna remember who I am. The only value I have here is from the love God's given me and then the love I can pass on to others. And love doesn't necessarily be all soft. A lot of it's hard. But in coming to grips with really truly believing that, which is a progression thing. It's not a snap moment. That's like a you're working on that hard thing for lots of years. And dealing with that, that's what's really pushed me over the edge. And now I'm just grateful.
It seems like one of those feelings that, as you said, it's a slow burn over time. And then all of a sudden, you don't even really notice that you've changed your mind about something. But then somebody asks you and you go to respond and you're like, oh, I didn't think that before. It's kind of like a weird kind of out of body experience almost.
Yeah, I actually think one thing I've learned, talking back to the very beginning of the conversation about my son being in the hospital, I realized that being willing to have the conversation repeatedly has helped me process a tremendous amount. So I don't know what I've told who. I just try. But I can tell that I'm having the same conversation and it's shifting slightly each time based on how he's doing and how I'm processing things. This is the same thing, but over a larger period of time, right? So just the same with my son, like my heart is changing about how I'm handling it. The circumstances around it are changing, but me communicating that to people every single day, whether it be with my wife or people at work or my friends or our church or whatever it ends up being, that has helped me really understand what I'm feeling. Same thing goes here, right? Every time I talk about it, I understand myself a little bit better. I understand exactly what I'm feeling a little bit better. And like you said, I took me until maybe 2 years of being out of the Marine Corps and back in the exact same industry that my dad was from in a different business to really realize, oh, I didn't realize I went to the Marine Corps because of this. I mean, I didn't realize it while I was in the Marine Corps. I didn't realize it until years after getting out that was a big one of the top 5 reasons I was over there.
You've talked about the balance or integration, as you call it, of like your work and your family life. What does your wife think about that? And how do you, in the best way, bring those things together? Because I think that the way that you describe that to me sounds like the most optimal thing because it tells me that you love what you do. When you can bring your work home with you and you want your personal life to be combined with your work, that means you're doing something that you really love. And it's like it can become this all encompassing thing. I feel in a similar position on a lot of stuff with this podcast. I love that. And I love being able to like be at home and do this and facilitate these
Totally.
conversations. Drawing that line, or oftentimes I think there needs to be a line. It really, when you've got a partner that maybe doesn't understand that, how have you worked through that with your wife? And maybe how does she feel about it?
Yeah. So let me answer a little bit of my story that goes into how my relationship with my wife is framed.
Mhm.
A a bit about what it means to me to love what I do, and then how that ties into what your passions from a work perspective is. This is something I feel pretty strongly about. So my wife and I grew up together, which is not something most people can replicate. I knew her since I was a little kid. Our little brother's in the same kindergarten class. We used to vacation together growing up. So that framed a deep understanding of each other's families and how our families work. Like she literally was on vacation with my parents before. This is way before we were dating, right? And I was on vacation with her parents. And so that was never like she understood my framework and my growing up in a small business world way better than I could have articulated to anybody else going into marriage, right? Because she just saw it growing up. Secondly, I believe this is a thing that I don't think people, I've never heard someone talk about, but is a big part of our story. The military was a fantastic starting point for us in marriage. It can be a really bad place for certain marriages, but it was really, really good for us. I don't know if you've ever heard the phrase leave and cleave. Like we didn't live together before we were married. It was very much a new start. She's several years younger than me. I took her out of college to get married. A lot of our community was very confused and concerned about that. We said, screw it, we're doing it anyway. We had her family's blessing and my family's blessing, but a lot of our ancillary community was confused by that and concerned because she was only 20, barely 20 when we got married. But we went to the Marine Corps, and within weeks, I was gone for a week at a time. And then I was gone for every single week for 4 days for a while. And then 2 years into marriage, I deployed for 7 months. And her ability to grow in her self confidence of running our home, her life in a different part of the country, without me was a huge confidence boost to her, huge confidence boost to me. And that framed the next stages of life, right? Now, if I work long hours, I'm still not gone 4 nights a week. I'm still not about to leave for 7 months or longer at a time. And so we still feel it's really good, even though I work way worse, different hours than many of her friends' husbands. That's been hugely valuable to me. Now let's lead a little bit into how I view this like love of work thing. I'm not like I just love business. I just love thinking about problems. I love thinking about different ways of moving the pieces around to accomplish things a little bit better. That's what I think about in the shower. That's what I think about when I'm running. Like I can't help myself but listen to a book on anything and I'm going to think about what it can do for work. But I don't necessarily love, and this is where I get to the passion thing. I don't necessarily like love landscaping and that run a landscape business, right? I think it's cool. I value it. I think it's a valuable service, something I'm proud that we do well. And there are definitely services that I wouldn't be as proud about. But it's like, give me the opportunity to lead a team with a lot of humans that is building something that is we can be proud of. It gives us valuable service to customers where we can make customers happy and do God glorifying work. And I'm pretty happy in almost any service business. And I've thought about doing another service business. And likelihood at some point I do another service business. And let me be clear, I don't have any intention of selling this business. I tell my team that all the time. I believe that. I've seen my dad go through some painful times after selling business, seen close friends go through some painful times after selling a business. That is not my intention. But it doesn't mean necessarily that I'm the right person to be in this seat for the next 30 or 40 years. If there's someone better than me, then bring it on. You do it. I'll go do something else. I think that we get this thing about being passionate about what you do wrong. I think that there can be parts of it that you can be excited about or passionate about, but a lot of time, I mean, work is cursed. We are promised that this is broken thing. It's not going to be satisfying all the time. It's still going to come up short. But I do believe that the idea of work is a blessed, God given thing that is, can be, and should be an act of worship. And that doesn't mean I'm not fun every day doing it, but I'm really grateful to be a part of something that I believe in and going forward. So passionate about like landscaping? No. Passionate about building the team and the people that are around here and providing a good service and working with Rogelio and Felix and Cesar and Eleazar and Joe and Leroy and Vanessa and all these people. Yeah, I'm super passionate about that. I love it.
The people that I listen to that talk like you say similar things, and I think that my takeaway has largely been that you may not always be passionate about what the specific thing is, but there is an intangible thing that you're optimizing for personally. And it sounds like yours is impact. You really enjoy the impact that you get to have on your customers' lives. You get the impact of growing this team and impact positively impacting their lives. You enjoy that. And I think that in good entrepreneurs, they are chasing something that is qualitative. It's not like oh, I'm really passionate about like this specific act of work, because on a long enough time horizon, you're not going to be doing that. If you start out a lawn care company today, you're going to be mowing lawns. Maybe you really love to mow lawns. If you want to mow more lawns, you can't mow lawns. Like you eventually kind of graduate yourself out of the business. And I think that those bigger, more qualitative elements seem to be an interesting trait that I'm picking up on in some successful entrepreneurs that I've talked to. We're about 30 minutes into it, so now it seems about the most appropriate time to kind of get your introduction. You've hinted at a couple things. Maybe spend 2 to 3 minutes talking about what lands you here today and maybe up through your acquisition. You said private school, Texas A&M, US, the Marine Corps, and then buying a business. Maybe kind of fill in a couple of those gaps and bring us up to speed, and we can roll from there.
Yeah, let's see if I can make it more interesting than I did before, which is going to be a challenge. But born and raised in Austin, Texas. I am bullish on Austin. I love Austin. My wife misses old Austin, so that's a constant tension for us because I like the opportunity that it's now affording. Was in Austin before Austin was cool. So born and raised. small classical Christian school, which they really focus on teaching you how to think and not regurgitate knowledge. So I was not at all, I mean, I was prepared, but not like, I was not a good at like standardized tests and stuff like that. I was much more, it's like every class is sit around a table and have a discussion and argue your way through anything, including like math and science classes. Went to Texas A&M and I was a finance major, decided to I went and worked at Wells Fargo in the bank for a summer, and it was so miserable that I called the Marine recruiter. And I remember standing outside, and the recruiter actually said, "Hey, sir, you probably wanted to call an officer recruiter." That's how incompetent I was. I had no idea what I was doing, and so he pointed me towards an OSO, thankfully, based on my general interests. And I went and talked to him and got in the Marine Corps. I think it might be interesting to talk a little bit more about how I chose the military at some point if that's interesting to you, but we'll move through that now. Aside from just the fact that I hated the bank, went into the Marine Corps, did just 4 years, had a really great experience. And in fact, had such a good experience. It was part of the driver of me getting out. I knew I was going to have a worse experience if I stayed in. I got to be in a fantastic base, meaning I was I was in California, living on Texas taxes. I knew I was going to end up in 29 Palms or North Carolina. That's not terrible, but compared to Pendleton, it wasn't going to be as much fun. I wanted to be as close to the NCOs as possible, and I was an engineer. So the farther I progressed, the more of a staff officer I was going to become. That was not interesting to me. I wanted to be in the field with corporals and sergeants and below. And I wanted to really I liked the physicality of it, and I just knew it was going to become less physical. I also got super lucky with the assignments I was in. I got to deploy really fast. I got to be in Iraq. It was the first group in Iraq after the ISIS stuff. It wasn't exactly kinetic, but it wasn't exactly boring. We got a bunch of rockets shot at us, but I never was actually looking at a bad guy in the eye, which is a good thing. If you're most Marines, and I still feel this sometimes. Sometimes we wish that we would have had a little bit more opportunity, but when I am wiser, I remember that it's actually a good thing that I didn't. I got to go and do a big exercise in Oman as well. And my boss got hurt right before we went. So I actually got to be in charge of the security delegation to Oman, where I was in charge of 100 plus guys for that 60 plus days. And I mean, fantastic leadership experience. Again, I was doing things I shouldn't have been able to do. I knew that I wasn't going to have the same opportunities. And I knew we had our first daughter and our first kid, and I wanted to get back closer to home. And so my wife actually wanted me to stay in. And it wasn't like a strong argument, but at the end, we decided that we were going to get out, and we came back to Austin. And like I kind of mentioned earlier, this company kind of fell into our family's lap. I have there's a guy named Golden who was running it day to day. He was not one of the owners, but he was really good friends with the owner. And we gave him ownership when I came in, and we were equal partners. And when I came in, I was beginning of 2017 or end of 2016. Again, doing 1.5 million, and since then we had some really significant fights in 2020 around COVID, not because of COVID, but around that time. By God's grace, we came through that season, and I bought out his majority share. So I own the majority, but he's still a really fantastic business partner to me. I still treat him as an equal. Since all that happened, we've had 3 more kids, like I mentioned earlier. So we've got 4 kids, and my world generally revolves around about 15 minutes from here. So I work 15 minutes from home. I go to church 15 minutes from home. My kids' school are 15 minutes from home. Both my in-laws and my parents are 15 minutes from us. My best friend lives basically down the street. That is the that is the life we're in. The plan going forward is I plan on doing this for a long time. I plan on raising our kids and seeing where God takes us, whether it's in this business or doing something else. I'm tremendously passionate about leadership development. I'd love to talk a little bit more about that, what we do specifically in the businesses to do that. And so I spend a lot of time around younger guys specifically, but sometimes younger gals that are looking to grow in business, and we spend a lot of resources and time helping them get there.
I would love to get into you buying this business. I always think it's interesting when you've got a second party that's involved, especially as like another owner of the business. Can you maybe like unpack that a little bit? Talk about maybe why that was a good or a bad decision, and maybe with the benefit of hindsight, what you would have done differently knowing what you know now.
Yeah. So first of all, I'm just a kid coming out of the Marine Corps. We don't have any idea if I know how to make money, right? Like we can the way my dad talks about it, I think it's actually a pretty good analogy. Is like when you have someone go through like the NFL combine, you know which guys ran the fastest, who have the did the most bench press, can squat the most, the biggest hands, whatever. Like this guy's got all the intangibles, but those guys don't always translate to actual players, like good players, right? And like you end up with those Tom Brady's, like, maybe he kind of sucks, but we'll take a risk, and it turns into Tom Brady. So my dad has a great story about one of his first ops guys had checked every box. I'm gonna come back to your question. I'm sorry, but I'm excited about this story. Checked every box, cleared his desk every day, was extremely organized, great communicator. They just weren't making money. My dad couldn't figure it out. He ended up having taken a job to move with his wife back to Oregon. And his number two was like a field guy. Didn't even have a high school degree. And my dad literally looked at him and said, George, you're in charge until I find someone else. And the next week they started making money. And it was not organized. And it was like a little bit sloppy, but the guy just knew how to run a business, like just run his little portion of the business. That guy now is like one of the top guys at $100 million company. Never finished high school, but he had it, right? Whatever it is, he had it. So we looked at me and we said, he's got some pretty big hands. He can run pretty fast, and he's got a good legacy. And his dad played pros, but we don't know if he's going to be any good. So we're not going to take a huge risk there, right? And here's the opportunity. Let's see. So it wasn't a huge, I mean, it was a very significant financial risk for me because I put all of our savings into it and borrowed some money to make it happen. But it was like borrowing from my dad. So I wasn't putting our livelihood really at risk. It was going to be uncomfortable. Golden had been running the business, and he had a track record of helping customers. I mean, I said they were losing money. They were squeaking along, right? They were surviving, but barely. I mean, at first glance, it looked like a weird decision to put somebody else heavy on top of that structure. We decided to take a risk on it. So it was a coupling me with someone that had a lot more life experience and specifically experience in the business, right? And so that was really wise and worked out really well for the beginning. And my first task was just like figure out how to make money. No, figure out how to cover your own costs, Nolan. Like that's what I'm gonna do. I came in there, we treated each other as partners. Like I'm gonna raise prices and find expenses to cut and not pay myself very much in order to figure out how to like survive this first year while I get my feet under me and we figure out which of our roles better fits. He's much more operationally focused, he's system oriented, he's organized, he's task driven. I'm much more big picture, I'm more employee focused. For a long time there, he focused on today and tomorrow, and I focused on everything else. And that worked really well for us. In the end, a great quote that applied to why we ended up having to do what we did is that it was not that one general was better than the other. It's that one general is better than two. Again, it's not that one general is better than the other. It's that one general is better than two. And so we came to this point where we were just fighting like cats and dogs, and not his fault. In many cases, it was my fault. I wasn't a great communicator around some of the things that were driving him nuts and vice versa. And we got to this point where we realized like one of us has to be in charge here. There was also some misalignment from what was needed from a financial perspective. I had little kids, he had grown kids. And so what he needed from that perspective versus what I needed and what I wanted to pull from the business versus what he needed to pull from the business were not aligned. And we realized we could solve both of those issues, both the leadership issue and the financial issue, in the short run at least, by me paying him a significant chunk of money to buy out a bunch of his share and become the majority owner and therefore the de facto leader. And to his credit, he's done a fantastic job of being a number two. And I felt very comfortable being a number one. Not everyone's suited for that. A lot of people are suited really well to be a number two, and that's not better or worse. It's who you are. That's okay. So we went ahead and did that, and me and our relationship have been far from perfect since then, but much better. And I'm really really grateful to have him around. We still fight. We had a uncomfortable conversation this morning, but that's normal. That's life, right? Like we just spend so much time around each other, and I mean I see him more than my wife a lot of days, right? So
Need to find a way to get along with as much time as you spend with them. As you talk to other junior people looking to buy a business or maybe looking at another acquisition or something similar, do you recommend that people partner with somebody, whether that be in an ownership format, like I don't know what your guys' split was, but if it was 50-50, is that in your best interest if you're maybe not as familiar with the business? Or do you think that eventually it's going to come to that point and maybe you should just rip the band-aid off and pull the trigger on just taking it all and figuring it out or hoping that you can figure it out?
I think it is a unique relationship that can manage 50-50. I think, like I said, I think it's important to have a leader. The the second thing is, if you're going to look at partnerships, you have to look at some really important things. I think writing those things down about what I mean, and actually Gardley had a really good thing on this on Twitter the other day about like a two pager from a partnership perspective on like, let's talk through all the important things before we go through legal. Like,
Mhm.
hey, I want to hold this property for over 10 years. And he's like, oh, I want to do 2 years. Like, oh, okay, we should do this. So, like, Al, what is your, like, Golden and I, we didn't even work through it, but we both have like, we want to grow really big. If we both wanted to, like, if we wanted to back off, one of us had we were misaligned there. One of us, like, I only want to get to 5 million and I want to coast. Whereas the other one wanted to just keep pushing, that would have been really uncomfortable. So, you're like, what is your vision for the company goes? What is your personal vision of what you think you need to be making from a financial perspective? What is your vision from a geographic perspective? What kind of hours do you expect to be working? All those things, which again, Gerbley does a good thing of breaking out in that thread. Those things are really important. Secondly, you have to have a really different skill set, I think. You need to realize, like, otherwise, why are you doing it? It needs to be beneficial from a like Golden. Again, Golden is really systems oriented, is really detail oriented. I'm not. And I need that in order for me to reach my full potential. If he was a lot like me and had a lot of my personal issues, then we shouldn't be in the same team. We need to be reinforcing each other. And we do that really well. And if you don't do that, then you probably shouldn't be partners with someone. I think it goes without saying, but I will say it. If you don't have very similar worldviews and moral alignment, you're going to have some pretty significant issues come up. And then the last thing I'll say on this one is, even if you love and trust and respect the person without question, you should still pre-fight everything while emotions are still good. You should talk about what happens and paper up what happens if this shitty thing happens. What happens when this shitty thing happens? How do we handle this shitty thing? What happens if I die? What happens? Like, let's go work through all those things while we're thinking clearly, and we still have a vision of everything working good. And let's just hope they never need it. But if we do, I want to know what the answer is before we get there. And we were almost at that. I mean, we used those documents to help us resolve a lot of things in that really hard time. I was so thankful to have it.
I think you highlighted some really good things there. Just getting not just a verbal agreement and like because it's so easy to kind of fall into talking with a friend even about like something that you want to start together and like, oh, we'll just do this and we'll make this big thing. But the reality is you guys largely have different views or likely have different views about how things ought to be handled. And especially like, hey, maybe even if the business is a success, you still need to know like, hey, when if they in their head they wanted to get to a certain point and then just kind of lifestyle business their way out of it and just chill, that's something that you might need to know. And
Yeah.
you said,
And
oh, did you call that pre-fighting?
yeah.
I like that. That's cool. Just hey, if I die or we have a fight over this, this is how we're going to resolve it. Kind of a system one, system two type thinking. You were saying that you guys had complementary skills. Did you know that at the time?
No, super lucky.
Just
I
lucky.
don't, again, I didn't know what I was doing going in.
Mhm.
And I think my dad just felt comfortable throwing me to the fire.
It's worked out well, so you can thank him for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I learned a lot.
How do you think about finding people with complementary skills to you now? Is that to do that successfully, does it just a matter of knowing where you're weak?
Well, so it can go in multiple directions, right? Like, it can go in this like how you work and process, but it can also go in like a hard skills perspective. So I had a lunch with a guy yesterday who's an engineer. I'm trying to do this real estate deal, and I was like, "Hey, man, I don't know how to do any of this development stuff, but I can be a tenant that'll pay the bill. I'll pay the bill. You figure out how to add value. What do you think?" And like that is another way to look at it. And the way I looked at it now is more, I've got my guy. He sits right over there. He he works through the he is helped. We both make each other way better, and I plan on that being my guy for a while. pending something crazy happening. We're going to be on this road together for a while. As far as like other individual deals that help benefit our company, etc., that's when I start looking at hard skills. Now, again, something else we could talk about if you're interested is like I believe pretty strongly in incubating businesses rather than starting or buying. I think that people don't talk about incubating near enough. Now, when that comes to pass, I'm going to take some of my young guys, I'm going to send them out, or I'm going to start something internal and then spin it out. That's when we're going to have to start thinking about their skill sets and what kind of partners we need to find for them, or if they can lean back on the mother structure for those skill sets
Mm.
as they grow.
Have you incubated anything so far?
We have started other service lines internally, which I don't consider incubating. I consider that just building service lines out. We started an irrigation department internally, something we really needed and made sense. And that was a whole story in itself of figuring out how to pull that off because it's license based. And so, how do we get all that taken care of and beholden to personalities and all that stuff? But what I have seen work really well is my dad's janitorial company spun out a window washing company and a surface refinishing company over the last bunch of years. And that was really, it's been really powerful. So they leveraged all of their back office and relationships, created a new company, started off at very small. The person that ran it, they purchased a small window washing company, and then they started providing this service to clients that were already on their books, right? It's the same billing process. It's the same people. They're calling Jan, who already knows them as the janitors. Hey, we're also doing window washing. Isn't that cool? Let's do it too. At first, they started subbing it, and then they got to where they could do it all internal. And now they clean like 70% of downtown Austin. They're high rises. They're the guys on the ropes that are dropping down the side of stuff. They're their own standalone. They have their own back office. They have their own culture. They don't even office in the same company as the janitorial anymore. They have their own relationships. Some cases they have different relationships, but they were able to take a really high powered young guy that sat not literally at the feet, but in the same office as my dad for years, figured out how he did things, not from a systems perspective, but more from a relationship perspective, some system stuff, and go when they needed to. And it's been very successful. They're now doing it with a security company. The surface refinishing has gone really well. It's not going to be a huge business, but it's going to be a really good business. And so I think that we'll probably do a similar thing here because we do residential landscaping. I think we'll probably eventually get to where we're running a fencing company. I think or fencing and decking. I think we'll eventually do a pressure washing company or a fertilization company or a pest control company or whatever it ends up being. I've got 4,000 credit cards in my system. There's a lot of power there and a lot of people that trust us. We have the ability to leverage that into a much easier way of starting something than just going and starting a fencing company. Um, Brand, reputationally, the customer list, the trust, all that stuff makes it way easier to start that kind of thing than it would in any other way. So we'll probably do that. I don't know if that'll be dependent on how fast we grow and whether or not some of my young leaders get itchy to go do their own thing or they want to stay under our wing for a little bit longer.
When do you think about is the right time to be looking for opportunities like that? As you said, that, like, it's you wanna be, like, kind of established and make sure that you can deliver one service really, really well, but as you said, it's probably hard to not look at other opportunities where, maybe you're mowing a lawn or something for a client and, there's a different company that's there washing the windows or, they're doing something that you're right there next to them, and maybe you could be doing that too. Is it, listening for when the customer asks you? Is it a certain size and scale that you think about? How do you go about thinking about that process?
I think a big part of it is the people, right? If I had a pest control guy from Houston show up in my office tomorrow, I knew his friends and trusted him because I had some depth of relationship there. And he's like, Nolan, I want to start a pest control business. I'd do it tomorrow. I Some of the guys that I have here, one guy in particular, I think could really no, a couple guys, cool folks in particular, I think could really run things for themselves. They still probably need a couple years of experience of managing people, developing their skill sets and stuff before they're ready. And a lot of that's going to be every 6 months we have a conversation like, you still want to be here or no? I understand that someday you're not going to want to be, whether you're doing your own thing or you want to go back to law school or whatever you're going to want to do. It's great. I want to support you. Let's just do it really well. And so at that point, if they want like, you know, I really want to start something, I'm sick of working for you. I'm like, okay, well, let's do it together then, because we built a depth of trust. You understand how I work, and I'm willing to risk a little bit of my reputation on you. I'll bet on you, and I'll help you do that. And that's the kind of thing that I've seen my dad do for a long time, where the risk in the short run looks like it's not very smart because you're putting a lot of money and energy and capital into something, but in the long run, believing in that person relationally and financially can really make sense.
So you think about it more so from a perspective of less about the opportunity set, but more about the leader to go and take on a challenge like that, finding a skilled or has the potential to be a very skilled operator.
Yeah, I also think it matters tremendously about the leadership and stability of the company we're already running, right?
Mhm.
If it was just smooth and man, we're just making really good money and they don't need me day to day, and like the best thing I can do for everyone here is go figure out the next opportunity for the company, that's a different question, right? Like, I just expanded to a north location this year. I've been wanting to do it for 4 years, but this year was the first year I had the leaders in place internally that I felt comfortable doing that. If and when I have those extra people, then I'm like, man, you are ready to go do the thing, and the rest of us, it'd suck to lose you, but it's better for the world for you to go do this. Yeah, I'll push them.
I think now might be an interesting time to kind of like ask you about the business as a whole as you look at it. Maybe can you give us some figures in terms of like size? You said I think you were doing 1.5 million in sales when you took over the company. Maybe talk about the growth that
Yeah.
the company has experienced under you, and then maybe what have been some of the biggest challenges that you've hit in the process of trying to grow that.
So we did 5.4 last year. So by again, my perspective on the world is like really skewed, right? Because like my dad has built the landscaping company to over 100 million, right? So like I view us as little itty bitty, but you look at the random guy on the side of the road that's mowing lawns and done pretty well for himself and has 3 crews and is doing 1.5 million. That's really impressive already, right? So like they look at me and they think, wow, they're doing it. They're really big. I look at me and think like, yeah, I'm not even close, right? We're gonna be, if we're not already, there's really no way of telling, the biggest residential landscaping company in town. I think I wrote down a year ago that we're gonna be on the top 100 landscaping companies in the US. I think that's very realistic. I'm actually not gonna, it's like graduating for me. I always had an expectation that I was going to graduate from college. That's not to say for some people that's like a really big deal. For me, it wasn't because there was no question that it was going to happen. I just never thought about it twice. I don't know how my life's going to change when I reach that point, because that's just kind of my expectation for myself. So again, I think of us at 5.5 and I'm proud of where we come to, but I have a full expectation of us doubling every 4 years. The way that we got from 1.5 to 5.5, it's not, there's like, if people are giving you, maybe this is my own incompetence, but generally at this size business, they're so messy and fluid and people based and stuff that like, it's hard to project how you get that next million, except just keep doing the thing better and keep doing more of it and figure out how to find the next piece. So we added irrigation. That's now going to be this year. I hope it's probably going to be $400,000, but I hope that it's going to be $500,000. There's a chance. That's so cool. That's a whole $500,000 of revenue that we wouldn't have had if we not done that thing. But it was freaking rocky to get there. This year we have traction. It's a breath of fresh air. We've been saying it for 3 years. This year we're going to have traction. Oh shit, that person left. This year we're going to have traction. Shit, that person left. And we've got the team in place and the leader in place to really make that cook. And we've got the experience to really make that cook. So that was a big thing from a growth perspective. I'm not like a marketing nerd in that, like, I don't go and look at I do look at some of the analytics and all that stuff. I love building a brand and like communicating with customers and communicating internally. And at the end of the day, if you answer the phone, which a lot of companies don't do, and you do what you say you're going to do, we do the vast majority of the time. So if we screw up, people appreciate that at a fair price, and we're going to go. I'm also very aggressive from a pricing perspective, and that's been very helpful. And so 5.5, we're on pace right now at 20% for the year over year. So that would put us at 6.3 or 4 for next year. And or for this year, I guess 2023. And I'd be really pleased at 20%. I'd like it to be a little bit higher. But again, the life circumstance I'm in, if we can pull off 20% this year, I'm going to be really, really pumped. And by really, really pumped, I'm going to have the same exact facial expression.
Well, what you're looking at is what I can
Yep.
expect
This is it.
with 20% growth or
Yeah.
100% growth. Like this is what you see is what you get. In that type of business, where or how do you think about a mix of volume and price growth? Because there's only so much that you can charge for and in any service business, one of the pluses for the consumer is there's a million lawn care companies. But as you highlighted, there's a million lawn care companies, or maybe, 75% of those don't pick up the phone when you call them. So there's opportunity there. How do you balance unit growth and charging aggressive pricing?
One, there's not a clean answer, right? We push it, right? Like we've just pushed it as much as we can. A lot of it's, if you're going to give college strategy, was based on what do I think I can get away with, right? Like I'm not saying like, sure, I'd love to make 75% margins. That's just not going to be reasonable unless I have some sort of cheat codes from an efficiency perspective, which I haven't figured out yet. For mowing, let's call it for mowing, that's just not going to be reasonable. So it's like, all right, well, I just chose a number, right? Like, all right, well, this first year we're gonna see if we can make $50 an hour mowing. And I went and ran the numbers on the data because my business partner again had all the data. And I said, okay, these all need 25% increases. Oh shit, that's gonna be really hard. Those phone calls were uncomfortable. We kept a lot of them, you know? And so we pushed it. And the next year, like, all right, we're gonna go 55. We're gonna go $55 per man hour. Like that's how I thought about it. Now we're up to 65 plus. And that's how I price things from a mowing perspective. Everything's a little bit different. But I actually, I don't think I have it in here, but I have like a poster that is a joke poster that I made that's like just repeatedly different ways of saying raise prices. It's like that's the answer from a financial perspective in a lot of ways. I also just am really very careful about how I communicate with customers around raising prices. I made this infographic last year when everyone was talking inflation all the time, right? It's funny to me that we don't talk about it anymore, but whatever. And I took a picture of me with a lawnmower, some gas cans, some plants, a truck, and I made labor 18% over last year, truck 33% over last year, plants 25% over last year, gas 100% over last year because that was when the gas prices were high. And I sent it to customers and said, hey, I want to work with you for a long time. The only way I can do that is if I raise prices. Otherwise, I die. But the only way I can do that also is if I provide a fair amount of value for what you're paying. So this is me telling you, I have to charge this and I hope you accept it. And if not, that's okay. You can go somewhere else. But I'm telling you, those people are not much better than me and they're going to die if they don't raise their prices too. And you're going to end up coming back to me. And we've had really, really good success over the years raising prices with that general methodology of attacking it very specifically, giving them like inflation as a buzzword, not useful. Inflation as a infographic that shows what everything changed in price, very useful. Had a lot of people. We had more people respond with, "This is so helpful. I wish everyone talked like this. Thank you so much. I accept it. Have a good day." Than we did with, "I'm going to go find another service."
No, I like that because the customer is not thinking about every guy on your crew saying, "Hey, like groceries are getting kind of expensive. Can I get an extra dollar an hour?" Or, when you go to fuel up, like all of a sudden gas is 50% more expensive literally overnight. Like they're not thinking about those things. They're just associating with the service and not all of the other things that need to go into that. I think the general mantra you want to be increasing in excess of the inflation, but that's the time to pass it down to the customer when you
Yes.
have, hey, all of these other things, and that's how you continue to make more money. And I think that you're able to do that when you provide a good quality service. You're going to have a hard time. Either they won't leave because they know you're good, or they will leave and then they're going to go try somebody else and then they're going to come back. So
If you don't mind, let me tell you a little bit about our leadership program because I'm really proud of that.
that was going to be one of the other things we're definitely going to talk about today. So yeah,
Oh,
let's
okay,
hit it.
cool. You want to go there now? Okay.
Yeah, let's do it.
So we run this thing called Leadership Academy, and I'll tell you the origin story there. Well, I'll start with the origin story. So 2020
Yeah.
happens. No one's getting jobs, right? Because COVID and the whole world's terrified. It's just still only believe that you can get COVID from the Amazon package that was left outside for 2 days. right? And we go to the, I was literally at the office the next day, right? You can't mow lawns remote. Like nothing changed in our life except, I mean, we still showed up to work. A lot of my people went remote, et cetera, all the things. But I was on the phone with my dad and we were thinking, man, there's a lot of really good college graduates that would never think about service world that we could maybe go get. Let's see if we can do it. So we hired this girl and we said, hey, go find really cool college kids and we'll make a curriculum and we're going to run them through our businesses, multiple businesses. And so this is what it now looks like. And this is we're about to complete our third iteration. We're hiring for our fourth. So if you're out there looking for small business experience, look up leadershipacademy.io. Or if you're just curious, go look at it. And you can message me on Twitter and I'll send you resources and stuff. But what we did is we basically rotate them through three businesses. We got a coalition of businesses. Right now it's our landscaping business at 5 million, the window washing business at about 3 million. It is a fertilization company at about 16 million, and then it's a landscaping company at about 100 million. Next year, we're going to add a surveying company, which I'm really excited about. Frank Rivera, he's going to be great. And you go through these businesses, you rotate, you do about 3 months at each of them. You start at the very bottom, and we're very explicit about how physically grueling this is. You start at the very bottom, you mow, like a top choice, you mow lawns for weeks. But then you move into some more of a logistics role and then a problem solving role. And we have a schedule and it always gets screwed up because of the needs of the business. At the big business, at the $100 million business, they have different departments that they spend time in for over that time. But again, even then it gets screwed up because they need you in HR. So you get sent over to HR for solving that problem for a while. These are very smart, competent kids. Kids is the wrong word, but we're talking like master's degrees, talking D1 athletes, like SEC track stars type stuff. Like these are really impressive folks. My irrigation, the guy who runs my irrigation department has a master's in law from Northwestern. Like that doesn't make sense for him to come work for us, but we convinced him to, and we've provided a place for him to grow and challenged him. Anyway, you go through those three rotations, but at the same time, you're doing a tremendous amount of leadership development stuff too. So you read 25 books in the year. You mentioned type 1, type 2 thinking. They read Thinking Fast and Slow. They read all the classic business books. And our goal is to give them a doctrinal bait, like a doctrine, the base knowledge that everyone talks about. If you're going to listen to podcasts or read other books, like what books do all the other books refer to? They refer to Good to Great. All of them are going to refer to Nassim Taleb. All of them are going to refer to Daniel Kahneman and Thinking Fast and Slow. We also give them a whole bunch of core knowledge around like entrepreneur business, like stories. So they're going to read Made in America by Sam Walton. They're going to read Shoe Dog. They're going to read other practical, useful business books like the Voss book on negotiation. They're going to read Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. They're going to read the Constitution, and every single one of these books and articles, they're going to write about what they learned. They're going to apply it to their current business. They're going to take practical lessons in accounting, in Excel, in personal development, and Strengths Quest, and all this stuff. And we pay them while they do it. And how do we do that? It's because one, it's a recruiting effort. We're getting really good recruits for the long term. The majority of these people still work with us after the program. Not all of them. And we have good relationships with everyone's gone through, but a lot of them still work with us. And then two, they're doing work. Like these businesses all need more labor. And so while that person is practically more expensive from a day-to-day perspective than the guy that you can get to mow lawns typically, they're also problem solvers. So they're flex players, which gives a lot of value. When we need things done, they can go get a lot of things done. So we've had, not only has it been really effective from a recruiting and practical perspective, but we've really impacted a lot of lives. Going back to that impact thing, this is what I love to do. I love having these conversations about what's your gift and what's not. What do you like working in a $5 million business? You like working in a $100 million business? Let's find the right place for you. And I think that when this thing is 10 years old and we've got 100 people that have gone through this thing, the network there from a time perspective and a skill set perspective, whether they're in the business or not, whether they're all over Austin running different things or part of different things, can be exceedingly powerful and really, really special from a relationship perspective. We have some really good retreats, really good, meaningful conversations and relationships built. So it's something we're proud of. And that's one of the reasons I even got on Twitter in the first place, was trying to share that stuff, which I just believe that there's not enough ways for young people to go and taste small business before they see ETA in a headline or the silver tsunami in a headline and think, hey, I want to go buy a business. Like, you don't know if you should buy a business. You haven't done anything in the business. All you've done is iBanking. iBanking isn't all the same. Like, how are you going to handle it when your guy comes in and tells you his car got shut up, which is what happened to us yesterday? You
Yeah.
don't know until you go and feel it, and you may not like that. You need to go see if it's like, so you can, what it's like, so you can see if it is a good fit for you. And then if it is, then more power to you. You've got all the tools that you need in your tool belt to go succeed in that.
How much do you pay these kids or college students or,
Yeah.
we'll call them kids. I'm
Yeah.
probably right in that same category of people,
Right.
but how much are you paying them?
So we start with 50.
Okay.
And then I think I would argue we probably add 10 to 15 worth of education on top of that, essentially. So it's enough to survive. But my general thesis to people in their 20s is that 20s is about learning, and the ROI on learning is going to be far higher than dollars, if you can get that in your 20s. And so while these folks could, almost all of them, every one of them assuredly could have gotten paid significantly more. It's the kind of personality that is long-term thinking and likes the physicality of it that comes and succeeds.
I think that you've really laid out a good thesis for why it's good for you guys. Like, and it's obviously it will be good for them.
Yeah,
That's got
let
to
me
be
dig on that.
okay. I was gonna say
Let me
that's
dig
got
on
to be
that.
like a hard sell to say, hey, come and do this. Like, what is it that they are saying? What
Yeah.
are they hoping to get out of it?
Yeah. So I really focus on our side. The way I do it, I have this like visual in my head. There has to be an overlapping zone, right? If our companies were only going to pay them $0, of course it'd be worth it to us. Like we would get
Mhm.
all the value. If we were going to pay them 100,000, of course it'd be worth it to them, right? Like no brainer. We've got to find this middle ground in a place that adds enough value to them to where they're deeply grateful for the experience, and that we get enough value out of them to justify running the program, right? That's hard, and that number is different for every human. We've had a lot. I mean, I had a conversation yesterday with someone that was interested in the program. Ultimately, it didn't work because of that price point, right? They needed, based on their life circumstance and what they were looking for in the world, to go somewhere else. So we've tried to find a place that we think overlaps that well. What we get out of it, I've already articulated, is we're looking for, I'm not just looking for someone this year. I'm just trying to break even this year, because it doesn't make sense for me to pay someone that kind of money and go mow lawns fairly poorly, right? Because they suck at the beginning. What what makes sense for me is if I can find someone that's going to be running the next business in 10 years. If I find one of those people, it's totally worth it, right? If I find three people that are going to work here for 3 or 4 or 5 years and help build it while they grow even farther, that's totally worth it for me. But for them, you go and you search Indeed and you search LinkedIn and you look at development programs. There's nothing out there like this that we've seen. If you find it, great, show me. I'd love to talk to them because I want to share resources. But there's no other place where you can go and look at a company that's $2 million and a company that's $100 million in the same year. There's no other place where you can go and look at what the very bottom roll looks like, all the way up to getting. I don't even know if I mentioned, we get speakers almost every week or every other week. People all across the community that are running organizations or have extraordinary resumes or so much wisdom that, like, there's not anything out there that has this kind of thing. And frankly, we're a community that really cares about you, and we communicate that really well. In that you go it, and it's not just what we communicate with our words. If you go and talk to anyone that's gone through the program, they consistently hit on this thing that Nolan and Josh and Chris and Alex and Allie and Towsley and all these people that are the mentors and coaches through this thing, they are here in large part because they care about you. If they didn't, why on earth would I spend this much time away from my kids? And I want my kids to see me doing that. So I'm willing to give up that much time and energy because I believe it's a worthwhile thing. So they get a tremendous amount of value and experience. And to a T, and maybe they're lying to me, but I think it's accurate. They come out of it. The last assignment they have, as a kind of a tee up here for what their feeling is, they have to write their own eulogy, and we go to a state cemetery, and they have to read it to each other out loud. And so processing what you want your life to look like with a community of people that you've worked your ass off with for a year, around people that care about you and care about the community, and tremendously push you harder than you feel comfortable with, is a very valuable thing. And we've had really cool results from it and tremendous relationships built through it.
That is fantastic. That is so cool, as you highlighted, like, not only such a great and positive, unique experience for a high achieving young person looking for kind of a different perspective. But as you said, and also kind of mentioned earlier, you're seeding your own pipeline of like, hey, we need business leaders. And that allows you to kind of go start this irrigation company. It allows you to go, maybe more opportunities come up. You've got the people, the ones that stick around that are proven and they've kind of gone through the process. I really like that eulogy thing. What are some other things that you guys do in the program that are kind of like that, that are a little bit unique?
I mean, I already mentioned it. There's just not many things in the world where someone forces you to read 25 books in a year that we know are good, right?
Yeah.
So like I read a lot. I primarily listen to books actually, based on my learning style and availability of time. Because I layer things, but I wish someone forced me to write out my thoughts on every single one of these things because I'm not disciplined enough to do it. And so they have a forcing mechanism that makes them do that, or they look stupid to the whole group because we send an email on Monday saying, "Hey, Bob, you're the only one that hasn't sent in your writing assignment. Do it now." And just accountability from that perspective. And so I think that's a tremendous value add. We pay for them to have the audible and the physical book of every one of these books, and they have their own writing assignments. We have these buckets of like practical skills that they're learning, which I told you again is an accounting book, an Excel book, and structure of a business kind of conversations and efficiency conversations. And then we have some self-development stuff like strengths finder and a bunch of things that like articles and stuff like that. And then we have like practical soft skills, like we make them give speeches, we make them give a business pitch. And there's I think there's 6 buckets of those kinds of things. So
For all of those other SMB owners out there seeding their own pipelines, this is definitely a unique program, but I know a lot of folks out there that are training kind of those up and coming leaders, kind of instill in them, and those kind of cool exercises really get you thinking.
yeah, I mean, again, send me a message on Twitter, and we'll email you a lot of the book lists and the questions we asked, both for the writing assignment and the discussion conversations. That's why we're here.
One last question on that. What is the reaction and how does the integration of these individuals work with the people who are in the business? Is there ever weird clashing there? Or how exactly does that go down?
Good question. It's important. It's very important to have champions in the businesses at the beginning that believe in the thing and will trust them. Um, but to some extent, we throw them out there, right? Like Bob, you're on a crew. You have a much higher standard than the rest of them. That through people on the first day, right? Like you can't show you've got to perform at a really high level. You've got to learn really well. And also, here's 3 things I want you to think about throughout the day. I, by temperament, have done internship programs and stuff. So, like, all my guys are used to this kind of thing. They're used to the guy coming in. I'm sure they eye roll a little bit, but we've had enough good people come through that they now understand that these are a good thing. They have to kind of do a little bit of babysitting at the beginning, but again, you can pick up lawn mowing pretty quick. What I think, I suspect, I actually don't suspect, I know, is that when you're a crew member, you'd rather be led by someone that's done it. And you'd rather the guy is telling you, hey, go do 2 more houses. I need you to get these done. It's way easier to take that feedback from someone that you've mowed next to than it is from like the guy in the office that's in AC that has never done the work. And
Mhm.
so from a credibility perspective, I know it's really, really good from a long-term cultural perspective. But yeah, there's some eye rolling and stuff. There's some additional babysitting that's done, but I'm the one that advocates for it. So they know it's something I care about and I go and fight for. Each business handles it a little bit differently.
Nolan, this has been a really, really fun and enlightening conversation. My one of my last questions here for you would be if we were to take away one thing from Nolan Gore and implement it in our lives today, what do you think it would be?
I mean, most importantly for me is that there's this. So most importantly, big picture, and then kind of practically for the audience, I'm going to answer with 2 things instead of one. I'm sorry, not that sorry. I'm going to do it. I think that most people's exposure to Western cultures, Christianity, has been a watered down, shitty, moralistic, therapeutic morality. And that is not at all what Jesus intended. And it's a gritty, hard, beautiful, raw thing. I love sharing that with people. That's what's most important to me and to my family. As far as practically, I just really believe in this developing young leaders thing. I just really think it is a good thing for the world and tremendously rewarding relationally. And I believe it is already showing that it will be tremendously rewarding financially. And I think people love the Berkshire Hathaways of the world and the index fund investing, but just do it for a really long time. It'll pay off. But people don't do the same kinds of things with relationships. We're quick to cut things that are not profitable in the short run, and we're slow to invest in the really long term of business leadership development. And people need to do that more. That's a really, really powerful thing that people don't have the resources or the ideas to go do. People talk about near enough. And I think if we did that, the world would be better and you'd have more fun doing it too.
I think that everything that we talked about here today and everything that you shared really exemplifies, and I think that you really do a good job of driving both of those points home. So I appreciate that. What can myself and or the audience do to be useful to you?
Well, I appreciate that question. I mean, go take a chance on young folks. I mean, it doesn't mean cut them a slack. It doesn't mean let them do a shitty job. It just means actually believe that they can do more than you think they can, and then call them out when they don't. Because honestly, if we went and just said this program's super shiny, we'd have a lot less interesting people do it. But because we go and say, "Oh, that sucks," let me tell you, you probably shouldn't do this. You're probably not tough enough. It's probably going to be miserable for you. Those are the people you want. So one, it can be helpful if you know one of those people, send them to me. Two, if you want to do something yourself, go do it. Or we'll send you some of the resources to do it because I believe in that. And the best way again to contact me is through Twitter. It's leadership acad1 or just Nolan Gore. And message me and me or Allie, the girl that runs the program now, will send you the stuff. I mean, that'd be the best way you can help us.
I'll include those links and your info in the show notes. Nolan,
Please.
I really appreciate your time, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks so much for tuning in today. Your listenership helps me better educate people like you and the rest of our nation's military, both past and present, on building a successful life outside of military service. If you're looking for more ways the top vets are leading more effective lifestyles, building businesses, and using the resources designed specifically for you, press here for a selection of some of the best clips. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date, and I will be talking with you soon.